Hi guys, BuildZoid here, and today we're going to be doing a little bit of memory overclocking on the B550 ORS Master. I'm on the latest F11N BIOS, which unfortunately does not support high FCLK frequencies. So yeah, the FCLK limit is still 1900 on this BIOS, but that's not the point. What we're going to be trying to do today, or more like I'm going to be trying to do today, is I want to replicate this result that I got earlier today. So this right here, I want to get that 10458 and the 10418. The problem is, so the settings I was running for that was like 4900, like 48, because 4900 CL15. Unfortunately, I've not been able to replicate that result since I made it earlier today. So yeah, that's what gave me the idea for the video, because like I saved a profile, but the profiles don't work. So I'm gonna have to do this all from scratch in the hopes that that'll make it work. Um, and yeah, you get to come along and watch. So the first thing I'll point out is that um, so actually the memory I should point like sort of talk about the setup. So we are on a 5950X here. The memory sticks are the Team Group T-Force Xtreem ARGB 3600 CL14 kit. This is the better of the two kits that I have. Thank you, Team Group, for sending those over. And as you can see, I'm restricted to 3 gigs of memory in Windows, which is just a stability trick for running Samsung BDI-based memory sticks at high voltage. And the way that's done is we have this set to 3300 for maximum memory, and that's just in the system config. So the way you'd get to that if you don't already have, like, most people don't have that pinned, you just hit Windows R, which pulls up the run, and then you run msconfig, and then you go to the boot tab, advanced options, and set your memory limit. Now, obviously, there are some benchmarks that actually require a significant amount of memory, so, you know, you can't just restrict everything to 3 gigs and then run everything. But for Geekbench, we don't need more than 3 gigs of RAM, so this works just fine. Yeah, and we are on the B550 ORS Master, which a great memory overclocking board, not a very pleasant BIOS experience. So that kind of made the whole I'm not able to replicate these result even more annoying. It's just like super inconsistent behavior. But anyway, and the BIOS right now is really not ideal in terms of like well, the accessibility of settings, because the favorites tab isn't working properly. Like if I clear the CMOS, then everything in the favorites tab disappears still. So yeah, that sucks. Anyway, let's just get into it. So first up, gonna start with 1.162 volts on the SoC. Generally, the CPUs, like, they're basically best memory overclocking in my experience happens around 1.15 to around 1.2 volts. Above that, the memory controller tends to get kind of upset. Below that, the memory controller doesn't clock as high. So yeah, we're going to go with that. DRAM voltage, we're going straight to 1.95 volts. Unfortunately, we can't go over 1.95 volts just because a lot of the CPU, like the memory controllers on a lot of the Ryzen CPUs, for some, I don't know if it's like a combination of the new BIOSes or like the newer memory controllers just don't seem to like higher voltages than that anymore. Yeah, so I don't know why Gigabyte changed how the DRAM termination setting works. It used to be that you could just punch in a value, and now it's like an offset, which is really dumb. We're going to set that to 0, and then we're going to set that down by 50. So that way we're going to get, at 1.95 volts, we're going to get 0.925 volts termination, which should be like, that's basically optimal voltage for these memory sticks. And then we're just going to go straight to, well, let's just go straight to 4800. And for the settings, I'm going to start at 16, 16, 16, 21, 37, 10. Actually, we're going to put that to 14, 4, 4, 4, 8, 240. So, well, these four settings right here, those should work on basically any kit of Samsung B. Well, any good kit of Samsung BDI should be able to do 4, 4, 4, 8. Actually, even the 16, 16, 16, 21 at 1.95 volts, like, I'd be very surprised if a kit of B-Die wasn't able to run these settings. Single rank. If you're on dual rank, it's a completely different story. Basically, good luck getting over, like, 4400. Honestly, good luck getting to 4400. But anyway, so 240 TRFC. TRFC is one of the places where some sticks might actually need a higher TRFC when running like 4800 because this frequency is pretty high. RTP, we're going to start with 10 on that one. 16 for TFAW. So basically, this doesn't go lower, that doesn't go lower. If your memory sticks are incredibly good, this might actually go lower. Like, I can boot too. And I just clipped the mic. I'm sorry about that, but anyway, I can boot too, but it's not stable at 2, so we're going to go back to 4 on that. SCL, we're going to go 4. That's not a 4. We're going to set this one to 4, 1, proc ODT. The motherboard, just proc ODT on auto with this board seems to work best. Like, I actually know what value it sets, but like, if I try to copy it, it seems to upset the memory controller for some reason. So yeah, in gear down mode, we're disabling gear down mode so that we can run 2T command rate, and also so that I can set CL15. 2T is, like, this is actually suboptimal for performance, but it's a huge stability booster, so that's why we're running 2T command rate. And then we're not going to touch anything else. Like, this should just work at this point. With any luck, it'll just work and won't F9. Okay, so that's good. So that does just work. Now we get to the hard part of, does it still make it into Windows? Because that's what I ran into, and again, this is what I get for fiddling with my audio levels. I'm just gonna have to keep turning the mic down, or... It's like OBS keeps saying I'm clipping. Anytime I get a little bit more excited. Anyway, yeah, no, so basically when I ran into the issues of, like, not being able to replicate the result, it was a case of, like, I couldn't get into Windows. Like, it wasn't even like I couldn't make the settings boot. I could. I just couldn't get into Windows to test them. So yeah, we'll see if that's magically gone away. It might be like some weird interaction, because there was like a bunch of other settings that I was setting. Like right now we have 1800 Infinity Fabric, so the score is going to be kind of garbage. But like it's like the thing is, there's just so many variables when it comes to memory overclocking that I'm really not sure what was causing it to just stop working eventually. Yeah, like 4800 CL16 is like, I'm not impressed, but we need to, like, go through the process basically. Honestly, on most motherboards, you won't be able to boot 4800 straight up. Well, most motherboards. You'll be able to boot 4800. You should be able, any motherboard that has a new memory topology, you should be able to boot straight to 4800. But if you're on an older motherboard, like an initial launch X570, you're probably going to top out at 4600. So anyway, that worked. The score wasn't too bad at 9900. This goes to show how little the super tight timings do. We could probably run 4800 CL16 at like 1.7 volts. So, yeah. Because the thing is, like, most of those sub-timings don't change depending on the voltage anyway. So now we're going to go 14, 14, 13, 34. That's the hard part. We're not going to touch TCWL, because if you mess with TCWL, it just affects the TRD WR timing. Like that one just goes up as you lower TCWL, so it completely negates any performance gain. So we're just going to not bother with that. Anyway, we're just going to start and try, actually. Yeah, I do want to raise the Infinity Fabric. So this is one of the annoyances with Gigabyte BIOS is like, how do you get to the Infinity Fabric settings? Well, you go here, then you go NBIO, and then you go XFR, and then here's your Infinity Fabric. Isn't that lovely? And then for the actual voltages for the Infinity Fabric, you have to go over here, then you have to scroll down here, and then finally you get Infinity Fabric voltages. And we're going to go for 1000 and 1100. I don't think it's necessary, but it certainly doesn't hurt. Or it shouldn't hurt. We'll see. And the reason I'm starting with 1867 on the Infinity Fabric is because when I raise the BCLK, we can, like if I have it at 1900 and then I raise the BCLK, it's going to stop working. Also, unfortunately, this motherboard doesn't have a clock gen, so we're stuck with like whole megahertz increments of BCLK, which is really not like optimal, but like it worked at 102 before, so it's going to work at 102 again. Ideally, I want to be able to run like over 4900 at CL15, which these sticks are certainly capable of, but like I booted it once and then the motherboard wouldn't boot it again, so we'll see if I get lucky this time. Or if it was me just like screwing something up deeper, like somewhere in the BIOS, and then not realizing what I did. Which is why it's like, which is why I'm not using the profile, because it's like, I'm pretty sure the profile is just broken for some reason. Also, fun fact about the memory controllers on the various CPUs I have. These sticks that I'm running right now are actually perfectly capable of doing 4800 CL14, but there's only one CPU in my entire collection that does that, and that's the 4750G. Like, if I pull out the 4750G and run these sticks with it, they do CL14 at this voltage. Same subtimings, same everything. Like, I can run the exact same settings, CL14 instead of CL15. Okay, that's a 10300 already. Well, I dropped the TRC and then, of course, TRCD. There's also the Infinity Fabric clock going up. You know what? I'm kind of thinking it might not even be worth it to lower the TCL. Because it's one tick of cast latency, and that just doesn't do that much. So, like, I'm kind of thinking, like, well, maybe if I could run 4950 at CL16, that might just be faster than 4800 CL15. Though these sticks should do 4950 CL15. Like, that's also not supposed to be a problem, but the issue is, like, once you start pushing those really high frequencies, the memory controller doesn't like booting them anymore, so let's try 102. And hopefully we don't see an F9. Okay, no F9, good. Yeah, okay. And hopefully it still gets into Windows. So it's like, don't get F9, and then get into Windows. Okay. Now you might be wondering, why aren't you just using a higher memory ratio? Well, I could, but I'm not sure if a lot of the time the higher ratios actually introduce their own instability. So that's why I prefer to just crank up the BCLK. Like 4800 is a nice steady memory ratio in my experience. 4866 is kind of dodgy. So yeah. It would be pretty funny if I got like the 10,400 right now. The reason why I think it would be pretty funny is because it means that like bending over backwards to make CL15 work is just completely bloody pointless. Which would be like useful information to have. Yeah, so this actually literally does 10,424. So CL15 is overrated. Just the cast latency timing in general is just overrated. It doesn't do anything. It's all about the TRCD, TRP, and subtimings and frequency. And cast latency is just kind of there to look pretty. Because, like, seriously, we're at CL16, it's scoring, like, what? 30 points below CL15. And it's 10,000 points total. It's like less, it's 0.3% performance difference. So let's try 103 BCLK now. For this, actually, no, let's not try 103 BCLK because that's not going to work. Let's try 101, because if I raise the BCLK too high, the Infinity Fabric clock is also tied to the BCLK. Also, if you have an X570 motherboard and have any SATA devices plugged into it and you're planning to raise the BCLK, don't, because it won't work. But anyway, also you can corrupt M.2 drives by raising BCLK, so that's another thing to keep in mind. But anyway, the thing is, if I raise the BCLK too high, the Infinity Fabric is a multiplier on top of the BCLK. So since we're at 1867 times 102, that's like 1902 megahertz Infinity Fabric. But if I raise it up to 103, then we're going to be at like 1920 megahertz Infinity Fabric, and that's not going to boot. I know for a fact that that's not going to boot. So I'm going to try 4866 at 101, because that should give us roughly the same memory frequency, right? Or just a little bit, well, actually it'll be slightly higher, but hopefully that avoids the whole memory controller not wanting to train it thing. Except for the part where it doesn't train anyway, so we just go straight to F9, lovely. And now I'm wondering if it's going to just stop working again. Because that's roughly the way it went last time. It's just like I tried to use the 4866 ratio and everything went downhill from there. So maybe the 4866 ratio is just cursed. And you shouldn't use it. And I should have just dropped the Infinity Fabric. The problem is, like, there's no good, like, ratio under... Like, I need to run, like, 104 BCLK at 1833 Infinity Fabric. Because, like, I need to go from 1867 down in order to boot 103. But if I, well, do that, then my Infinity Fabric is slower. And I'm pretty sure the trade-off there on the Infinity Fabric would just lower the score. So yeah, now we're stuck at, you know, like this is a thing to keep in mind with Gigabyte boards, is they won't tell you when they recover. Right? Like, we didn't get any kind of warning or anything. It's just like, well, now we're at 2400 megahertz. We're still at 101 BCLK though. So hopefully we can go back to 4800 and like actually just boot and get into Windows. Like, that's the critical part right now, is like, can I still get into Windows? Can I still run Geekbench? Because like early, like I had to leave the motherboard turned off for several hours for trying to do this again. Okay, looks like it's still fine. Though right now the Infinity Fabric has dropped back down, so anyway, I've got Zen Timings here. Great utility. Highly recommend you download Zen Timings if you're doing any memory overclocking. Now, it doesn't detect BCLK differences, so you're obviously going to want to have something like CPU-Z for actually getting all of your clock readings right, but it tells us our I/O die voltage, our Infinity Fabric clocks, all of that stuff, and it doesn't have to be the, you know, bloated Ryzen Master UI. It even tells us what memory sticks I have. Anyway, yeah, so the timings look all correct. VDDG is still set. Infinity Fabric dropped because we hit the F9 code a bunch of times and that resets the Infinity Fabric setting. Anyway, let's run Geekbench again. So far the motherboard's been pretty well behaved. It hasn't kicked us onto the backup BIOS chip yet. If there's two things I could ask for this motherboard to have... Well, actually, no, it's like... There's one thing I would remove and one thing I would add. I would add a clock gen and I'd remove the second BIOS chip. Because if I actually had a clock gen, we could go in less than 1 megahertz increments of BCLK, which admittedly won't make too much of a difference to the overall score. Like, you know, if you raise the BCLK by 0.5%, which would be like 0.5 megahertz, is not going to really make much of a difference to the score. But it might, you know, give you the option to truly run every single frequency maxed out, instead of like having the Infinity Fabric slightly underclocked in order to run slightly higher memory clock. Okay, so yeah, so there you can see the effect of the Infinity Fabric just being like running at 1800 right now. So the score is way down, but that's fine. It's not a big deal. Also, the memory clock is down a bit, but that's also fine. Kind of wondering if I could run gear down mode. I'm not... Actually, I probably can't, because it's not been stable before, so... 102, I'm just going to walk it up on the frequency right now. No F9, good. So we're going to try 103 next. Okay, solid. 103. So now we're going well over 4900, so that's going to be not happening, of course. I'm pretty sure you could brute force it to do it, but I'd need a different motherboard. And I've had it over 4900 before, but yeah, it really doesn't like doing that. Okay, so it's just going to quietly reset on us again. And that's actually been one of the neat things with the F11N BIOS, is it actually resets properly. Some of the other BIOS, well, it like recovers properly. A lot of the other BIOSes I've used with M4 motherboards recently don't recover, like, at all, which is great. Now, there is a downside to the recovery. I don't know where the retry memory setting is for Gigabyte boards. It's buried somewhere, and I've not found it. And so if I need to like brute force some like settings, then I can't, because can't find them. Also, what would be really neat is if there was a working skip memory training function in the BIOS. Oh, and I need to drop all the way down to 4800 or it's not going to post again. Or, yeah, it's not going to post. Hopefully it hasn't, like, put us on the backup BIOS chip, but I don't think it has. Yeah, no, it hasn't. Okay, good. Okay, so we just go all the way back down to 100, and hopefully now it starts working again. And no, it doesn't. Ah, yes, the Ryzen overclocking experience. Well, it's kind of like Ryzen combined with Gigabyte. Well, I think we're back to the point I was in before. I wonder if it's like some weird thing that happens when the BIOS like safe like goes to safe settings. Like it screws up something and then it stops working. Cuz like everything was fine until it's like recovered a couple times. So, okay, well, just going to try 4666, which on this motherboard is like very easy to boot most of the time. And I say most of the time because while I haven't seen it F9 yet, that doesn't mean it can't F9. Okay, so, right. So that worked, and now hopefully the memory controller will figure out how to run 4800. Yeah, okay, so now that works. So that's memory training for 101, is just like if a high frequency doesn't immediately work, it might be worth it to like walk through the ratios before it. On some motherboards, you have to start at like really low frequencies and like go up in like 133 megahertz increments, but on stronger boards, you can start at relatively high frequencies. Also, there's a factor in this is going to be the fact that we're running like really tight subtimings at this point, so training straight to 4800 isn't going to work super easy. Okay, so now what I want to do is we're going to try go back up to 102. Please train. Okay, it does. We're going to go into Windows, and then I'm going to mess around with some like memory controller settings. And see if I can't get the score to be even higher. But yeah, it looks like this is the limit. It's a real shame that I can't like raise the BCLK after the system has booted, because that would skip the whole memory training procedure. But unfortunately, like the thing is, if you raise the BCLK while you're already in Windows, it screws up the Windows 10 clock. So if I raise the BCLK by 2%, Windows actually uses the BCLK for monitoring time. And so it'll think the whole system is like, it won't actually record, like it won't notice the 2% performance increase because there will be a 2% time dilation within the operating system. So it'll think that time is passing faster. So even though the benchmark will be finishing 2% faster, the operating system won't be able to measure that because time will also be passing 2% faster. So like, and I'm not like, basically I would need to change the BCLK right after the memory training is completed, so that it's before the memory, like before the operating system is before the OS loads, but after the memory training is done. But there's no way to do that on this motherboard that I'm aware of, which is really annoying. But you know, it like the Gigabyte makes gaming motherboards these days, so it can't exactly complain about the fact that it's missing like a ridiculously hardcore overclocking feature like that, the ability to change BCLK during startup. There are motherboards that offer that, but yeah, it's like not a standard feature at all. Actually, I don't think there's any AMD motherboards that do that. I think it's an Intel only thing. Anyway, so Dijkstra is gonna like, well, Geekbench 3 is still running, so that's good. Now we're still on the low infinity fabric. It's just like the memory that's going really fast right now. Like I'm pretty sure the CPU would pass the benchmark at like 4950 or something if I could just get it to train the damn settings. Like instead of going 1415 F9 on the postcode, if we could like skip the whole F9 part of that. That would be amazing. I kind of want to try drop down to CL15 at this point, but it really doesn't seem to make much of a difference, which is kind of interesting. Well, it's not really that interesting, but like I always knew, like I've always known that CL is just like, it's the most overrated timing there is. It's like everybody, like it's the timing that like is used in part numbers and everything. It's also the timing that unfortunately does kind of the, like of the primaries, the most important timing is TRCD. TRCD RD has way more impact on performance, is way harder to run low, and like has way harder walls on various memory chips. And then like, well, you know, memory kits are spec'd by CL because that timing just arbitrarily happens to be first. Anyway, so this is something, this is my capture card misbehaving. So we're just gonna ignore that, and I don't want to be in that part of the BIOS. I want to be in this part. So here we're gonna go, and we're gonna set FCLK back to 1866. Again, I can't set it to 1900 because we're at 102 BCLK, and that won't work. Hopefully this boots. And now it doesn't work anymore. I mean, I kind of expected that might happen, but I was hoping it wouldn't do that. Yeah, no, it's just F9ing now. I feel like I need to start over. That is so obnoxious. Also, I should, like, the fan that's on the memory sticks keeps moving every time the system restarts, which is getting kind of annoying. Should have, like, mounted it better. It's just kind of sitting on the memory stick, so... Yeah, so that just reset. Lovely. Thing is, it reset the FCLK setting, so we're gonna go BIO, XF for enhancement. Like, I bet it won't let me run, like, 1867 at the same time as the high BCLK now. Let's try enable this. And F9 again. Which, like, that's supposed to be... Oh, I guess I need to drop it back down to 4666. And then walk it back up in the frequency. Yeah, so... This... Okay, well... Evidently, you're not allowed to fail when Ryzen memory overclocking. Like, if you screw up once, everything goes to hell. It's like, oh, you failed to set the settings properly once. Well, now nothing's gonna work. I don't even know how it does that. It just, like, forgets how to function. Yeah, so go back to 46. So unfortunately, the entire AMD CBS section of the BIOS resets every time the BIOS fails like that. Well, every time the post-process fails like that. So I'm gonna enable the OC mode. I'm hoping that adds a little bit of stability. I don't have any proof of that, but that's what I'm hoping for. Also, we should disable this. What else is there? That's fine. Wait, did that reset? No, gear down mode's still disabled, so that's fine. So one other thing I wanted to change, DDR4, right. This, which was suggested to me as, like, helping with stability, but I've not, and helping with performance, but I've not actually seen it do anything, so we'll see, I guess. But right now, I'm going to be really surprised if we can go all the way back up to 4800 with 102 BCLK. Okay. Now the moment of truth. Can I bring the BCLK back up? It would be really cool to do like 10,500 points. Like, if I could do that, I'd be very happy. Because, unfortunately, I didn't take the screenshot of the highest multi-core memory score I've gotten, which was actually 10,475. Which isn't really much higher than the 10,450 that I'm getting right now. But, yeah, I did at one point have a slightly higher score, and it would be like, it would be really cool to do 10,500. Because that would literally be the highest score I've gotten so far. Not that there's any practical use for this, like, because of the 1.95 volts, I only have 3 gigs of RAM accessible. But, like, you know, it's kind of like, why do I overclock 7970s when they're not relevant in terms of performance anymore? Well, it's because it's fun. Okay, so the hard part of Geekbench passed. Like, it's really weird with the AMD memory controller. It's like, there's two states. Either I get into Windows, or, like, it doesn't... Like, it either works completely, like, I get into Windows, Dijkstra, like, it finishes Geekbench everything, or it, like, either doesn't train or doesn't get into Windows. There's, like, okay, so that's 3 states, not 2, right? Because there's the, it doesn't train, it doesn't get into Windows, it works for full... Oh, yes! I mean, I was mostly aiming to just go over 10,500 multi-core, but we've got 10,500 everywhere. Lovely. So yeah, now if I could also just well, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure the memory controller would totally run another 50 megahertz as long as that 50 megahertz was applied after the training procedure. Maybe even like 100 megahertz more after the training procedure. Because right now we're training to like, 2900. I mean 4900. So 2450. And ideally, and I'm going to be saving a screenshot, so I'm actually setting this up so that we have something to, like, if somebody else wanted to copy my settings, I want them to be able to do that. If somebody can copy my settings and then figure out a way to, like, make them go even faster. It's a shame that I'm not at CL15, but it really doesn't seem to make much of a difference. Because, like, I basically got the same score I got before, and do want to include the motherboard in the screenshot, just to, like, have proof that I did this on this board. Because I do have a lot of boards. And I also want the SPD. Oh, right, this doesn't work. Yeah, the SPD reading doesn't work. Okay, well, that's a real... well, actually, I have Typhoon Burner, so we'll just pull up the SPD from Typhoon Burner. There, just to show which, like, memory sticks I'm using for this. Where's my mouse? All of the RGB. I'm kind of sad that the default rainbow cycle on these spends so much time in the blue, like, blue colors. Because I think the dims look best at, like, red to orange range. Actually, even green on these looks really good. But the default color cycle just spends most of its time on blue. It's just, like, the blue looks good, but I'm just not a fan of the color blue in the first place, so... Anyway, let's put this over here, put that over there. We don't have enough space for this. There, perfect. So we've got board, SPD. Oh, and also, since we're running 102 BCLK, you might have noticed I just had like 5.1 gigahertz on the CPU right there. Which I don't know if we can get that again. Oh yeah, so you can see it sometimes blipping up to 5.1. I even did 5150 for a little bit. Yeah, because when you move the mouse, the CPU is like, oh my god, what's he going to click on next? Do I have to do something? So it boosts all the way up, but I like go over an icon in Windows. Tends to... Okay, no. Well, whatever. Let's take the screenshot. Windows, print screen. And 3 times just in case it failed one of them. Let's see if I can make it run at CL15 and if it goes faster. Because, like, that's the thing with overclocking. It's never fast enough. Like, until you literally can't boot anymore, or something breaks, it's not fast enough. Unfortunately, we can't run CL14. Like, the CPU just won't train it. CL15 might work. And it might give us, like, a whole 30 points more. And it does. Lovely. But can we still make it into Windows? Because, again, there's 3 states to this memory controller. It either works, it boot, or it doesn't Windows, or it doesn't train. Okay, it's still Windowsing, so that's good. Oh, actually, this time I'm going to wait for... Like, you can see that, like, right after boot, Windows actually does a bunch of stuff. Well, that little blip right there. So like right after booting Windows, running benchmarks normally doesn't give you the best scores. You should wait. Well, Windows 10. If you're on an older, or if you strip down your Windows 10, this OS is a mess. Like, I've been using it since like an X299 motherboard. So this is not an optimal operating system at all, but it works. And for Geekbench, it scores just fine. So, at least for the memory scores, I've not really been paying attention to the multi-core score. I'm not going to break any records for the multi-core score with auto CPU clocks. Well, now that I think of it, I haven't technically checked that it isn't the memory sticks that... no, because I've tried other memory sticks and they also complain above 1.95 volts. And like other memory sticks that I've run all the way to like 2.05 volts, and as soon as you use them with like a Ryzen... oh, and now the score went down. That's super weird. Right? Because now it's doing 10,400. Like, that is super weird. Why is it lower? TRDWR 11, and on the previous run, I mean, we could try rerun it and see if the score improves, but like so far it's been really consistent for me, and we're getting 1054. TRDWR is 12 on that. The rest of the timings are the same. I don't get it. Why is it slower now? I guess, well, let's try rerun it. Maybe it was just like random variance, but I kind of doubt it. Like, technically 1% variance, which is what 100 points on a 10,000 point score would be, is not really, like, that's not, like, it's not very high variance for a benchmark, but I've not noticed it so far while messing with this setup. So, it would be weird that now it's like a thing. I wonder if there's some timing that we just straight up can't see. That's like, if you lower the TCL, it actually slows down that timing. Actually, I wonder if I'm maybe raising TRDWR back up to 12. Like if I ran TCL 15, but TRD 12. Or TRDWR 12. Yeah, no, it's definitely slower because it just dropped another bunch of points. Maybe it's really unstable right now. That's also an option. Like if you're right on the edge of stability, you can end up losing performance. Yeah, considering it doesn't want to boot, I think it was just disintegrating in the operating system. Like, it was slowly erroring out more and more, and that's why the second run was even lower than the first one. So I guess CL15 is just, like, right on the edge. Okay, well, that's fine. We have other settings we can try play with a little bit. Like, I wanted to try 220 there, and I wanted to try 6. Let's go for it. Okay, no. And I'm gonna call that done. Because yeah, I'm done. Because there's no more room. Like, there's literally, like, there's a bunch of timings that, like, literally cannot go lower. As in, it is not, like, you can't actually set them any lower because it's not supported for them to be lower than what they are at already. And then the rest of them, it's like, yeah, I lower them, and like, for TCL, I lower it, the performance drops. For some of the others, I lower it at F9s. So, yeah, I'm done. Still, though, I'm really happy with the result. Like, this is the highest Geekbench memory score I've gotten. So, yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Kind of wondering if it might not be... Well, the thing is, like, gear down mode wouldn't finish Geekbench earlier. Oh, and I guess I could have run IDA latency to, like, because the funny thing is, at settings like this, the latency is actually not that bad. It's still worse than if you, like, there's different timings that, like, actually completely different settings that you would want to run if your goal is to get minimum possible IDA latency. But considering the fact that we're, like, desynced, right, because we're running 4800 on the, actually 4900 on the memory, this actually doesn't have that bad latency. Just because the memory settings are so absolutely insane that the latency ends up being kind of okay. But if you were running this at, like, reasonable volts, so, you know, like 1.5 volts, yeah, you're not, like, the latency penalty is way too big. And anyway, that's kind of all I wanted to do in this video, was just, like, see if I could, like, either replicate or beat my previous result from earlier today. And, well, I beat it by 100 points, which isn't much, but I still beat it. Like, that's the whole bloody point. Yeah, so I guess I'll turn off the system, and the memory sticks that I'm using here are just the Team Group T-Force Xtreem ARGBs, so these lovely sticks, which the biggest downside to them as a test bench stick is that they're way too glossy, and so just turn into horrible fingerprint magnets. And also, like, dust really stands out on them. Like, you can see where I grabbed that memory stick already, so yeah. That's my biggest complaint for them. They look too good for test bench use, and here's the spec. I mean, I do have the SPD pulled up, but yeah, so that's the 3600 14 15 15. So, anyway, big thank you to Team Group for the memory sticks, thank you to Gigabyte for the motherboard, and thank you to the patrons for the 5950X, as well as the very kind person, like the person who actually sold it to me. But, you know, the patrons provided the funding for the acquisition of the 5950X. So, yeah, big thanks to all of the people I just mentioned, and, well, kind of people. Like, ultimately, somebody's involved with designing the products, right? So, anyway, yeah, so that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. And if you'd like to support what I do here with AHOC, I have a Patreon. There's a link to that down in the description below. There's also the AHOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, stickers, posters, you know, the usual YouTuber merch. There's a link to that down in the description below as well. And yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.